is that you pray for.
Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and magic puzzle boxes. I'm Noah Hook, and today I'm very happy to say we're looking at the brand new Hellraiser. For those who don't know, I started this channel with a review of every Hellraiser film, and it's a franchise that's very near and dear to my heart despite its fluctuating quality. The second I found out David Bruckner, one of my favorite contemporary horror directors, was tackling Hellraiser, I knew I had to cover it. I'm going to start this review with all of my non-spoiler thoughts, so if you haven't seen the film yet, you can get my general feelings without anything too specific. That being said, if you are a movie purist who wants zero spoilers, I'm not really sure what you're doing here, but you should probably hop off. And once I wrap up my general thoughts, I'll move into more spoilery territory, but I'll be sure to make it clear when that happens. But with all of that said, why don't we jump in?
What is it?
It's a puzzle.
I'm going in, and I'm going in hard. This is at the very least my new second favorite Hellraiser movie. Hell, it might be my new favorite even above the original, but I would need to rewatch it a couple more times before I ever make a claim that big. A high ranking in this franchise isn't necessarily saying much, it's a pretty low bar, but this movie has a ton going for it. First and foremost, this film lets the Cinebites be the stars of the show. Nearly every film in this franchise gets bogged down by the boring human story that it tries to mash together with the Cinebites, and it almost never makes a cohesive film. The story just revolves around shitty, immoral people that hallucinate, and the Cinebites show up at the end and kill them. That's most of the films in this franchise. And technically, I guess you could pretty much say that's accurate for this movie as well, but I think it's a bit more compelling. One, the Cinebites get way more time on screen, and the human story is really pushed forward by the presence of the Cinebites. Speaking of, the Cinebites look fantastic. I fucking love these new designs. I understand some people miss the gothic black leather outfits, but it has been high time for a while that this franchise move away from the 1980s, and these new designs really push the horrific body modification while moving away from this very human aesthetic. They're interdimensional demons who worship pain. Why would they wear clothes when they could just twist and invert their skin to look like it? Jamie Clayton, as well as the other Cenobite actors and actresses, really bring great presences to all of their roles. The last two films have really proven how big the Hell Priest shoes are to fill, and I think she did a great job bridging aspects of Doug Bradley's iconic performances with a lot of new material. The Cenobites just feel way more powerful and otherworldly than ever before, and their added time on screen gives them the time to show off their bizarre intricacies. A lot of the new designs are unlike anything we've seen in the franchise before, but there are still enough familiar characteristics for longtime fans to appreciate too. And as far as I could tell, most of the Cenobites and the body horror is at least mostly practical. I love the gross, abject nature of the first two Hellraiser films, but both the time in which it was filmed as well as budgetary constraints have always made them feel just a little underwhelming compared to the crazy things that are supposed to be happening on screen. This film looks beautiful and nightmarish, but most importantly, it looks real. I will say the film was a little slow to start, but I thought the build-up was pretty good. If you're really just in it for the gore, you'll have to be patient, but trust me, it does get there. The film pretty much has strong character work going on, so I was interested enough when the Cenobites weren't on screen to pay attention and care about the characters. There will be a couple dumb, predictable, and familiar moments and decisions throughout the film, but I don't think they're huge detractors from the larger story. But generally, I recommend anyone who is even remotely a fan of the original or of this franchise go watch this very soon. Hell, if you don't even like any of these movies or have never seen them before, go give it a shot. You don't have to be familiar with the previous franchise to enjoy this movie. This is a fresh start for Hellraiser, and I honestly hope that David Bruckner continues to flesh it out in the future. Okay, so those are most of my general thoughts, so time to get a little bit more specific. If you haven't seen the film yet, I would suggest hopping off now and going to watch it for yourself.
Their blood, their pain, all for us.
I'm gonna start with the shit I liked best, and that would be the Cinebites. By my count, there were 7 that we saw throughout the film. Of course, we have the priest, more commonly known as Pinhead, and as I said, Jamie Clayton is fantastic in that role. I liked the continuous conversations that the priest had with Riley, trying to convince her to sacrifice her own friends. Through those moments, we learned a lot more about these new Cinebites, especially that they are more predatory than ever. In the previous films, the victims are usually sort of asking for it, but not here. The victims here are pretty much all just innocent victims being used by the wielder of the lament configuration for their own purposes. The Cinebites are more like sharks following the scent of blood in this film, and that feeling of being chased is present throughout. A big question I had going in was how central Pinhead would be, and I was very glad to see that the other Cinebites were given time to shine as well. It's great that the Chatterer made the cut, and the fact they're played by the humongous Jason Liles really adds to their terrifying presence. The Weeper and the Gasp felt like the priest's second and third in command, and it was great to confirm that they have similar powers. The Asphyx, the Mask, and the Mother were less central to the plot, but I just loved how much variety we got from this gash. And I'm curious to see if Roland makes a proper Cenobite return in any possible sequels. But one component I wasn't expecting was the return to the Leviathan. This god helps give the Cenobites a sense of higher purpose, both to them and to the actual audience, and the addition of humans being able to meet with it was a very interesting addition. The labyrinth itself and the ways it merges with our own world looks better than ever, and I also love the upgrade to the box and the way it collects blood from the sacrifices to feed Leviathan. My only Cenobite complaint is they felt a bit lacking in the pleasure department. They seemed almost entirely focused on the pain aspects. I think that perverse nature is really important to the original film, so I was surprised to see that bar wasn't pushed here. My other complaints mostly come from the human components of this film, which is pretty standard for this franchise. Generally, the story is pretty strong and can stand on its own, but it all seems just a little too familiar. The addiction aspects early on really reminded me of 2013's Evil Dead. I could see Trevor's betrayal coming from a mile away. The other side characters felt pretty undeveloped, and everything involving Voight just felt a little fragmented. I'm not sure if it was his specific gift from Leviathan that felt a bit lackluster, or if he just didn't feel really necessary to the script, but once he became a more central character, I kind of lost interest. But I do appreciate the larger atmosphere his character created. His mansion gave me big Event Horizon vibes. It felt like a character within itself. Plus, he and his property are pretty direct nods to Channard and Hellbound, the party sequences and the statue from Hell on Earth, and the spacecraft from Bloodlines. There were just so many nice little moments where I could pick up on homages to previous films in the franchise. I already mentioned the film is a little slow to start, and at almost 2 hours, it might be just a little bit too long. Odessa Azion gave a great performance as Riley, but the character herself never quite got the redemptive moment I was expecting her to. She did stab Trevor, and I'm glad she was able to save Colin, but I don't really expect her life to get any better after the credits start to roll. But that does make sense with the film's final themes about the suffering of everyday life. It's really not supposed to be a happy ending. So overall, I have some small complaints, but I'm really just so happy to see the Cenobites get a fresh start. I think Hellraiser 2022 is one of the strongest remakes or reboots we've gotten in a while, and I also think it's one of the best horror movies of the year so far. This and Prey have me excited to see what else Hulu might be up to, and I'm definitely excited for whatever next film David Bruckner ends up making. If you haven't watched Hellraiser yet, go do it right now. It has beautifully nightmarish visuals, horrifying new Cenobites, and lots of great expansions on Clive Barker's books and films. Well, that's about it. I'm definitely gonna rewatch Hellraiser soon just to confirm my own thoughts, and it's honestly got me kind of excited to redo my Cenobite ranking video. But before I get ahead of myself, I need to stick to my regularly scheduled programming, so join me next week as I give my first thoughts on Halloween Ends. Thank you all for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my first thoughts on the new Hellraiser. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support this channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks, y'all.